People, are you ready? Are you ready for the ultimate tech startup competition? Let me hear it. Disrupt!
Hello, my name is Saeed Jabrani. I'm the CEO of Ametabug, and we're here to revolutionize the way you report bugs on your mobile platform.
Happen will revolutionize location-based mobile news aggregation as you know it.
We're making the world a better place through Paxos algorithms for consensus protocols.
And we're making the world a better place through software-defined data centers for cloud computing.
A better place through canonical data models to communicate between endpoints.
A better place through scalable, fault-tolerant distributed databases with ACID transactions.
And we are truly local mobile social.
And we're completely so-mo-low.
And we're molo-so.
We're low-mo-so, bro.
We were so-low-mo, but now we're mo-low-so. No, mo-so-low. No.
Hi, my name is Inbal Landsberg, and I'm a business development manager at Dexcel Pharma. And my PhD is actually from here, from this very place, from Tel Aviv University, and in genetics. And after that, I continued and became a postdoc at Stanford University, doing bioinformatics. And I worked at the Silicon Valley for a few years. And for the past 3 years or so, I've been evaluating innovative pharma projects at Dexcel Pharma. And what I think becomes very apparent, just like we saw in this amusing video, is when you watch a lot of different projects, it becomes very clear what works and what is slow-mo. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what it would take for a pharma company to buy into your pitch. And a little spoiler ahead of time, a lot. It would take a lot for a pharma company to take your project on. And we'll talk a little bit about what that might be and how you can improve on that. I'll try and touch and provide some solution to the apparent enigma of why sometimes a lab project, which may seem like a mediocre one, would make an excellent project for the industry, and vice versa. And I'll also touch a bit on what to present and how to present for an innovative pharma project. So when we're talking about the project and the selected one, we're talking about an evaluation funnel. So we have many leads at the top of the funnel. We have many leads with very, very little time investment in each and every one of them. And naturally, as we work our way down the funnel, we have very few projects with a lot of investment of time. And for a pharma company, if we consider a medium-sized pharma company that takes on anywhere between 9 and 5 or 10 projects a year, you would think about a lot of leads being thrown for various reasons. And to be the one of the selected few, it would take a lot. All the different components need to be there and need to be validated. So when we're talking about the major components, that would be a valid indication, a valid market need, a known established efficacy, or a very good solid scientific logic for the mechanism of action. So all the different components like IP need to be there. But it's good but not enough. What you really want is for all the different components to kind of make a whole story. So the best metaphor I found for it is to make the stars align. So we have a lot of different components, and in that respect, the stars are a very good metaphor here, because there are a lot of them, and we'll see some of them soon. And then they need to work with one another and create one project in which all the different components make sense together. And I'll explain. So before we start, we need to kind of understand what those components might be. And we'll do that by reverse engineering. So pharma companies are companies, and as such, they want to make profit. And for that, they need to have drug products that they can manufacture, market, and sell. And different maybe from high-tech or other fields, here you don't want to be agile, you want to have a very solid plan, like we've mentioned before, maybe 10 years ahead, and you want to make sure that this clinical development makes sense. So if you just consider the different parts of what a clinical development plan might have, it will take into account the recruitment. So what kind of patients are we looking for, and how easy is it to find them and enroll them into the trial? How many visits would we need? Do we bring them in every day? They might not want to enroll. What are the endpoints that would bear on the cost of the trial, right? So what kind of tests are we doing, et cetera, et cetera. And if we just consider the first component, the recruitment, it's very easy to understand how that might bear an influence on other parts, like the time to market, right? If recruitment is very slow and we need to open many sites in different parts of the world, then our time to market is growing as a direct result. So all the different components need to work together here. And if we consider another component from another category, so if we look at CMC, for example, and we have the chemistry, manufacturing, and controls, and consider just one component, the API cost. Okay, if we're thinking about an ingredient that is very costly, that would bear on our investment early on. It might be very expensive to finance the preclinical and the clinical plan, and we would need a lot of investment when we don't have, at the stage when we don't have certainty whether or not we will make it to market. So we might want to address that in our plan, in our preclinical plan early on, and kind of put in strategies for de-risking. So it all needs to kind of make sense together. It's the API cost and the preclinical and these investment strategies. So all of this kind of need to come together. And I'm sure that by now you kind of understand the complexity of this alignment and how difficult it might be to create a project where all the different components align together. So I'm not just going to leave you with that complexity. I'm also going to show some kind of a solution, and the way to solve it, there is not one solution. And if anybody tells you differently, please go and check their banking account. And if you don't find 7 figures there, don't believe them. So I'm going to suggest some solution by examples. So those are all examples that actually work, and you might try and kind of tailor around them. So one such example is a repurposing of an almost drug. So an almost drug is a development that actually did not make it to market. And some pharma company has a lot of data just sitting there regarding preclinical and sometimes clinical results. So if you can get your hands on such data and then use the same therapeutic, the same drug, for something else, for a different indication, a different dosing, a different route of administration or whatnot, you might be able to purchase that data and work with it, and so reduce shorten your time to market and have a lot more certainty that this particular ingredient would be a suitable drug and kind of raise your chances of actually finishing the development and getting into the market. Sorry?
But there is an issue with the IP at this specific example.
Correct. There is an issue in IP, and it usually depends on how long that was. If you can get your hands on an old one, that's true. I didn't go into all of the points, but that's a very good point. Or typically you can just have a deal with that specific company, and then it becomes a lot more complicated. But it is doable, and we had examples like that. These are all real-life examples of projects that worked. Another one is making a safer drug by a new route of administration. So if the drug is already out there on the market, but you develop a new route of administration, say oral instead of injection, or a patch instead of an oral drug, then you might be able to have some benefit. It could be a shorter time to action, so a fast action. Or it could be a different metabolite profile, making the drug safer. So all of these might be able to solve kind of this alignment project. So I've talked before about, I've mentioned the apparent enigma between the lab that appears from the lab industry, that sometimes you would have a project that may seem very like excellent project coming out of the lab, but it is not possible to translate it into a project or a product in the industry and vice versa. And I think one reason for that is the way that we think about innovation. So we are very much wired to think about disruptive technologies. And oftentimes, or more often than not, what the industry is after, or at least the medium-sized companies are after, is the incremental innovation. So again, I'm going to explain this by an example. So if we consider two projects, one of them is a new novel API. So we have a new active ingredient for treating, let's say, Parkinson's disease, and we have a great efficacy in a mouse model. This is a very common situation. We have preclinical efficacy established in some animal model, and it's a completely new chemical. And on the other hand, we have another project, and we only have, here we have an oral disintegrating tablet, so a new formula of a drug that it is established. It is not on label, it's used off label, and it's used for some orphan disease, not a lot of patients. So which one would you put your bet on? Which one seems more realistic, might be more profitable, might help more people, or whatever metrics you want to use, which one is the better bet here? And it's kind of hard to answer at this point, and the first might seem like a more intriguing one. So you start collecting more data on it, and if you find out, for example, that the first one is not only a novel API, it's also a new mechanism of action, that is a big risk. We don't know if this will actually work. Oftentimes, the scientific logic is there, but until you try it in people, many people in a randomized way, it's almost impossible to know what works and what doesn't. And here we have a lot of risks. So perhaps we don't have formulation. Perhaps the dose that we need is very high. So will we be able to cross the blood-brain barrier or not? So those are all risky questions here. On the other hand, if we know that we are addressing a children population where oral disintegrating tablet is very important, and that we might have here a regulatory path, the 505(b)(2), so we can rely on an existing product. It will shorten our time to market. It will give us a lot more certainty that the project is more viable, is feasible. So I think the take-home message from this is really that we need to start thinking about innovative not only as a disruptive technology, but kind of look at it more as a continuum. So on the one hand, you might have the new indication, the new target, the new protein that was just now associated with the disease. And it's all very exciting. It's an important science, and we should definitely keep doing that. But on the other hand, on the other side, we have new scheduling and addressing special populations like children and the elderly, and women in general, and pregnancy, and all the others that are not less important to address. So maybe an oral disintegrating tablet formulation may not sound like something to write home about, but actually this is a major driver of compliance in general. It's a major driver in how what makes patients comply or not, right? So if we have a very safe, efficacious drug and the patient doesn't take it, then it's not possible to deliver the benefit. So just like innovation that the disruptive or incremental are both valid strategies, it's the same with companies. So your project might not be a good one or not a good one. You just need to find the right fit for the right partner. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the Dexcel strategy as an example here. And for Dexcel, for our company, what we're looking for in terms of project types are actually the 505(b)(2)s that I've already mentioned. So we want to take those projects that they can rely on existing data, so a product that's already out there on the market, or data from the literature that we can base on. We're looking for formulation types of projects, or a different route of administration, combinations of existing drugs, and repurposing. And typically the projects are clinical phase projects, but we do take on preclinical projects with kind of a higher barrier for entrance. And our focus is orphan diseases, CNS and ophthalmology. But so apparently if you have a biological drug and you come to a company, an innovative biological drug, and you would come to a company like Dexcel, even if the project is very exciting and has a lot of potential, it is not very likely to be taken on, unless perhaps as an investment. So you do really need to kind of tailor it for the right company. Okay. So what is it that you want to present? And I'm going to touch on this point because I think it's one of the key points, and I see it often being ignored. You want to present a single therapeutic and a single indication. Many times we see small companies coming in and they have a whole pipeline and many indications for their favorite drug. And it's all nice and great, and maybe there are many indications for that specific drug, but at any given time we can only evaluate one therapeutic in one indication. And the reason for that is because if you think about the matrix I showed before, it differs for each and every indication and for each and every ingredient. So the competitive landscape would be different as you change the indication. The standard of care would be different, maybe a specific subpopulation that you want to address. So it's just not possible to evaluate more than one therapeutic per single indication at one time. And it's great to mention that you have others, but please focus it. One other point is kind of to have the elevator pitch ready. So to focus your listener and what is it that you're trying to do. And a good example for that is having a safer, lower dose drug X for indication Y with comparable efficacy. So you have like one sentence saying the basic logic of what is it that you're trying to achieve. And it's very important because when you're presenting, many of the people on the team would read everything you provide and will know your data almost as good as you. But then some of them are only consultants. So they are there because they provide some IP counseling or some CMC counseling, and they are not very familiar with your project, and you want them to understand what you're saying. So I think how are we doing on time? I think 2 more minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna jump a little bit ahead. We'll talk about a little bit of how to present it. So basically, when you have at the different levels of evaluation, we've talked about the lead and then going through the evaluation and then the due diligence. At different points during that process, you want to provide different amounts of data. So you want to provide some high view of your project kind of documents, which could be a presentation or whatever, in whatever form you want to give it, but you also want to provide later on the data itself. And one thing that many companies are very concerned with, and especially individuals or very small and unexperienced startups, is the issue of confidentiality. And you see that coming up time and again. And I think it's very important to consider that a valid pharma project should have exclusivity from more than one source or a very solid source. So if all that prevents another company from kind of materializing your project is your presentation of that project, it is probably not a valid project to begin with. So you want to rely on very solid forms of exclusivity, and it could be the patent term that you have, or it could be orphan exclusivity that you got, or a barrier to entry, your know-how, your manufacturing, or other sources that would prevent somebody else from doing it. And once you are very certain that you have exclusivity, the advice would be go out there and talk to many companies and talk early. And kind of considering kind of like an open book exam where it's completely okay to come and get advice from a pharma company early on. And the benefit of it is that you would be able to get inputs from various different angles from consultants or professionals that know their way around the different components, because no one person can know it all across the board. So it's highly recommended to start thinking about the different components as early as you can, even when you're choosing your research topic, if possible, and come see us. And I hope to hear your exciting projects coming up soon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much again.